All right, we are to that point now where students are going, yes, I am done. I've done my assignment. I've read what I was supposed to read. And this is where we as content teachers need to say, wait a minute, hold on, there's still more to do. Now, if we remember, I had told you before that we have to be careful. We usually forget to do our before reading strategies and our after reading strategies. So this is where, truthfully, it's really important not to skip the after reading strategies. So let me remind you, maybe, there we go. Like, why isn't it turning? Our before reading strategies are really about preparation, preparing the students to read. If we do not prepare our students to read, we should not be surprised when they do not read. All right, then during reading, it's really about the purpose. Why are they reading? What's going to keep them motivated to keep going in their reading? And so now that they are done, it's what I call passing on. And it sounds like they're dying, but it's not. They may think they are, or they have after they have read everything. But it's now, what do we do after? And it's about passing on our comprehension. Remember, there are two parts to comprehension, not only understanding, but also communicating. So our after reading strategies are really about this communication phase. How do we get students to talk about what they have read? All right, so I'm going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 after reading strategies. Now let me say this. A lot of times I have been in professional developments where the speaker has handed out kind of like our textbook. And they go, here's all the strategies that you need to know. They work, pick them out, now go and do them. But I want you to know that everything that I have shown you, or I'm about to show you, I have either personally done myself or I have observed these strategies being done. So it's not like, oh, this one sounds really cool, and I show you how to do it. That's not what I do. I want to make sure that what you are getting out of this class are things that actually do work. All right, so communication. Let's talk about tossed terms. What I did with my students is I actually found a pattern that made a block. And actually, my students made the blocks for me. And on different blocks, I wrote different things. Excuse me. So in this one, in my tossed terms, I used the questions who, what, why, where, when, and how. And they would roll that cube. I didn't have enough money to go out and buy a bunch of dice, so I always just used paper ones. And they would roll the cube, and whatever term was on top, they had to ask a question about whatever the topic was that we were learning. So for example, let me give you two examples. One's going to be for lower elementary, kindergarten, first grade. The other one will probably be middle school, I believe 7th, 8th grade. All right, so let's look at a unit on apples. So the student would roll the cube and it would come up with who. All right, the question was, who plants apples? And then they would have to tell the other student who was working with them who planted apples. Or sometimes they'd go, oh, I don't know. And the other student would say, oh, well, it was so-and-so, or it's the farmers, or, you know, it could have been on Johnny Appleseed. He was planting, I guess you plant apple seeds. You're really not planting the apples. You know what I mean. All right. The next, they would roll it again, and that time it would come up with what? Well, what colors are apples? And so they would have to talk about the colors of the apples. So this whole thing right now, remember, this is about communicating. They're talking with each other. They just didn't read. We didn't just look at pictures. It wasn't me, the teacher, telling them all of these things. It's now time for them to show their comprehension. All right, so there's an example for a lower elementary toss terms. Here's one, 7th, 8th grade. I actually did a lesson on acid rain, and I really wish at times that this was a course that we were all together, because doing my acid rain activity really boils down to the nitty-gritty of how do we get our students to read. But maybe one day you can either come to one of my workshops that I do, and I actually do a workshop with using acid rain, or maybe we can be in another class that's all together and we will do it. But anyway, here are some questions about acid rain using the who, what, and why. Who discovered acid rain? What is acid rain? Why is acid rain harmful to the earth? So toss terms is about usually 2 students together, each one taking turns with the rolling of the cube, and then talking about what they have learned. When I did this, I did it with my students during reading time. And I would spend less than 5 minutes doing this with them. And then we would go on and read what we were doing with our guided reading. But this really, it's about me listening to them, being able to hear what they remember about what they have read. So a really, really good after reading strategy. All right. Another after reading strategy is exit slips. Our exit slips. All right, let's just talk about exit slips here for a minute. Many times the exit slip is about how do I know if the students have any other questions about what we just talked about? I think that's great in theory, but I think it's horrible in practice. So let me give you some ideas about how to better utilize your exit slips. I used to tell my students at the beginning of class, before you leave today, we're going to do an exit slip. And here's what the exit slip is going to say. And rarely did I ever have them put a question about, what do you still have a question about acid rain? Because here's the thing. The exit slips that just want students to write down a question that they still might have, many students, want to get out of that class as fast as possible. Just like this picture shows, you see the student running out of the classroom. So they're going to either, I guess they were running out. They're either going to write something that they really don't care about. It's just a question just to get out of the room. Or B, they'll go, I don't have anything. I don't have any questions about anything. So they leave it blank. Well, then what teachers have done, and I've seen this done, they've actually graded them. Don't grade your exit slips. That makes no sense to me. But students need something more than just write a question down that you still have about acid rain, because they go, I don't know. It's kind of like, and I try not doing this in my classes, but I still do sometimes. When you say, are there any questions? Now, usually in my grad classes, grad students aren't embarrassed to ask questions because they really want to know. But when you are teaching middle school, they don't want to be the first one to ask a question. Why? Because it thinks that it makes them look dumb, like they don't know something. Or the other students are like, shut up, man. We want to get out of here. I want to ask a question. Listen, I've seen it. I've experienced it. So to ask students, are there any questions? Either they're not going to say anything due to something, or they're just going to write down something they really don't care about just to get out of the classroom. So what can we do with exit slips to make them more effective? Purpose. You have to have a purpose for them. And as I said before, this is not about questions. This is about communicating their comprehension of what they are learning, of what they have read that day in class. So here are some examples of things that I told my students. Hey, at the end of class, you're going to be doing an exit slip, and you're going to give me one aha moment, one thing that really stuck out in the lesson today. Now you see, that prepares them for that exit slip. See, if you wait till afterwards and then go, okay, write down an aha of something that you thought about today in class, they're going to have to sit there and, I don't know, I'm just going to write something down. But if you prepare them ahead of time, hey, be thinking about those ahas. What's sticking out? What really was something new? An aha moment or a wonder. Well, I wonder about. So at the end of class today, you're going to get an exit slip, and I want you to put an I wonder. Now, these are all things that I model for them. I don't care what grade level they are. You have to model for them. If you just throw this at them, oh, today I want you to write a wonder at the end of class, and they have never done a wonder before, they're going to be all over the place, or they're going to be very frustrated because what does the teacher want? So you model these things for them so that in the future lessons, they know what wonders are. Scratch your head. My students like the scratch your head one. The scratch your head one, truthfully, is what questions do you still have? But if you say, now put question down, they're not going to know, or they won't want to put it down. I want you to put a scratch your head moment down. Scratch your head. What are you thinking about? Or what more do you want to know? Or, I'm still not sure what, but you call it something different. Scratch your head. And a totally different attitude comes across in your lesson. So these are just some really good examples of ways to get your students to communicate with you. Then what I would do at the exit slips is the next day or a couple days later, I would talk about some of these exit slips. Hey, somebody had a wonder about, I never said who. Somebody had a wonder about da-da-da-da-da. Can somebody talk to me about that? And then the students were starting to discuss these exit slips. So it wasn't just something to do, turn in, get out of class. We actually used them for communicating, understanding. All right. Let's talk a little bit about these pretty things called graphic organizers. Oh, graphic organizers. There's like a million of them out there. This can be a during reading strategy. It can be an after reading strategy. But my whole point of putting this really pretty, isn't that a pretty graphic organizer? The colors, and of course it's talking about things that I like Rolos. Oh my goodness, Rolos and Snickers and Kit Kats. To die for. The only thing they don't have on there are my peanut M&Ms. You want a good grade in the class? Oh, I didn't say that. Peanut M&Ms. No, really, don't. Kidding. I'm really kidding. Really, I'm kidding. All right, so let's talk about these graphic organizers. So, what's the purpose of a graphic organizer? Now, think back to when you have used graphic organizers. And the question I have for you is, what have you done with those graphic organizers? The students have done them and they've turned them in. What have you done? All right, so let's talk about what you should do with graphic organizers and what you should not do with graphic organizers. All right, so first let's talk about the don'ts. Don't grade graphic organizers. Please, 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 please don't grade graphic organizers. The purpose of a graphic organizer is for communication. It's not if they got all the double bubbles filled in. Don't grade them. You can look at them, you can see what the student is thinking, but you don't give it a grade. Okay, my little soapbox here. You guys got me going today on our after reading strategies. All right, you're not going to grade it. Don't use it for a filler. All right, when you finish reading, take one of the worksheets on the graphic organizer and fill it in and turn it in. It's just a filler, and you usually don't even look at them. And when I say you, I'm not like talking specifically to anybody. I'm talking to educators in general. I've done it myself. I'm preaching at myself here. I have used them as fillers. What a waste of my time, and what a waste for my students' time. All right. Don't use them as a one size fits all. I was in a classroom one time, and the teacher had 2 graphic organizers, and they were on worksheets on the wall. And throughout the day, because I stayed there all day, at the end of any time the students were done reading, they had to go choose one of those graphic organizers and use it. And it was like by the end of the day, they had 6 graphic organizers for I really don't know what. But a Venn diagram does not mean that it fits everything that should be in a graphic organizer. When the double bubble came out, it was like a bubble with 2 bubbles, and then there were 2 other bubbles. It was just called the double bubble. I absolutely thought it was the most hilarious thing ever. Never used it, but I thought that the name of it was funny. Anyway, the double bubble is not going to work in every situation. So you have to pick, if you are going to use a graphic organizer, so when we talk about the do's, you have to choose the graphic organizer that fits best for whatever you want the student to communicate. Remember, it's about communicating. All right. Don't have them finish when completed and then just turn in. And then they never see it again. Or they get it back the next day with a grade on it. Or you tell them, well, put it in your folder. Okay. If you do a graphic organizer, there has to be a purpose in using it. Not just filling it in and turning it in. All right, so this comes to our do's. I must have had too much coffee again today. Here we go. Here are the do's. It's a communication prompt. So they fill out their graphic organizer, and then they're going to use it to communicate with someone. It could be the teacher. It could be in a group. It could be one-on-one with another student. But they're going to talk about their graphic organizer. What did they put on it? Why did they put it there? And you know what's really funny? What's really great is when you get these students talking about their graphic organizers, a lot of them go, oh, I never thought of putting that there. Or, oh, I see you put that. Wow, I thought that was supposed to be over here, and now I see it should be So it's about communicating what they have put down. All right, it's about vocabulary practice. Oh my word, remember all those wonderful vocabulary words that you got them all ready to read for, or even during their reading, they were coming up with vocabulary words? Now is the time to use them. If they learn a vocabulary word and they do not use the vocabulary word, they are going to lose the vocabulary word. All right? So the way to have them use the vocabulary word is to talk using the vocabulary word. Graphic organizers are great ways of getting that vocabulary. One time I had all of our vocabulary words written on the board, and while they were talking using their graphic organizers, they had to use at least 4 or 5 of the vocabulary words that were on the board in their communication. And they had to use them correctly. And I tell you, it becomes a competition on who can use the most vocabulary words while they were talking. Okay, collaboration. I lost where I was. Collaboration. It's about talking to each other, sharing what they have learned. Remember I told you in one of my last videos that one of the best ways students learn is from each other. So graphic organizers, collaboration, talking about it, working on it together, trying to figure out where things might go. All right, and finally, a do is a justification. Well, why did you say this is a similarity? Why did you say this was a difference? Why did you put that sentence in this third box and not the second box? So it's a justification. So the whole point of graphic organizers is not for the prettiness. Oh, I watched a class one time. The teacher let them color their graphic organizers, and you have some people who were artists basically, and they got A's for their creativity. And then you had the ones who could draw stick people like me, and they didn't get as many points for creativity. Okay, are we doing graphic organizers because of the prettiness or the creativeness of it? I'm more interested in knowing how the student has understood and is now communicating the information that they have read. All right, on to our next strategy. Mnemonics, not mnemonics, you get it. All right, so it means you create sometimes a sentence, sometimes words that will help you to associate the words together. So for example, if I was teaching parts of a plant and I wanted my students to know that there are 5 parts to the plant, and it's the seed, the stem, the leaf, the roots, the flower. That's great if a student can memorize that. But if you put it in a sentence, Sister Sally likes red flowers. Sister Sally likes red flowers. Sister Sally likes red flowers. You do that with your students, and then they're going to be able to go, the first letter is an S. Let's see, what was that S word that goes there? Or likes, leaf. It's the next slide. I will hold on to that for a minute. But mnemonics will help students remember things that you need them to remember from the text. But remember, it's also communicating about it. So not only should they be able to list these things, they should be telling you about these things or telling another student. Think, pair, shares are wonderful. I thought about the parts of the plant. I'm pairing up with someone, and now I'm going to talk about the different parts of the plant. Let me go off a little topic here on think, pair, shares. Sometimes lower elementary, early childhood, like really early childhood, pre-K, K. Try not having students do think, pair, shares because they don't work out too well, because the students just like talking about everything. You say, so what's the part of the plant? And Mary goes, did you know that yesterday my sister went out and ate an acorn that was, and you're like, wait, we were talking about, okay. So let me just quickly tell you how to do a think, pair, share with younger students. You buddy them up. You have buddy A and you have buddy B. All right, and they know who buddy A is and they know who buddy B is, and you have them sitting by each other. Well, during COVID, I don't know if you can have them sitting by each other, but you can have them, they're 6 feet apart. If you're watching this video during COVID, there may be a way to figure this out to keep them socially distanced. If we're after COVID, hopefully very soon, we don't have to worry about this. But anyway, buddy A, buddy B. All right, buddy A, put your hand over your mouth. Okay, buddy B, tell buddy A what's one part of the plant. So here's the one buddy. And then when it's done, okay, switch. Buddy B, put your hand over your mouth. Buddy A, it's time for you to talk. Okay, it can be done. I've seen it done. It works. All right, that was way off, but I couldn't help but give you a little sampling of think, pair, share in kindergarten. All right, here's a mnemonic for planets. My very educated mother just served us noodles. Once again, it's not just about memorizing the planets. Okay, which really bothers me that Pluto is no longer a planet. I think I'm going to start I don't know, an online campaign. Bring Pluto back. I don't know, just because I learned Pluto was a planet. But anyway, it's not about them just being able to tell me the planets in order. It's about telling the planets in order and then communicating about the planets. What do you need to know about those planets? Just talking about it. But this will help them to remember the plants. All right, here's one for English teachers. The 8 parts of speech. There they are. Whoops, where is it? There it is. Okay. When I was teaching middle school, and you'd say to the students, what are the 8 parts of speech? Noun, adjective. It took them like forever to name the 8 parts of speech. So I used this mnemonic with them. No person voted at an island called Peru. Now I made them get up and we would dance. No person voted at an island called Peru. No person voted at an island called Peru. Oh, and they really, okay. The girls really got into it. I mean, they were, and the boys were kind of like, no person voted at an island called Peru. But they were moving, and I was excited that they were moving. And they learned their 8 parts of speech. So once they learned their 8 parts of speech, we could then talk about them, communicating their understanding. Now you say, does this really work? Okay, do you remember my example with vociferous? And how years later I had a student find me in a grocery store and said vociferous? Well, I happened to go back to the school probably 3 years after I had moved out of state, but I went back to visit some of my friends. And I had several of my former students, they were now 10th graders, I had them in 7th grade, run up to me. And they were like, no person voted at an island called Peru. No person voted. They said, we had to list the 8 parts of speech on the first day of class, and we're all singing, and we got them right. And of course, I'm like, yeah, great. All right, these things work. Excuse me. Use them, but not just to memorize a list. To memorize the list, but also to communicate about the things that are on that list. All right, let's talk about responsive writing here. Responsive writing is something that we do afterwards. And once again, this is not graded. This is not graded. I just want to know if my students are understanding. So they're going to be writing about something. And I would put them in the situation of which we were learning about. So for example, if you were teaching about the Great Depression, I think this is now middle school, they talk about the Great Depression. All right, if you were president during the Great Depression, what 2 things would you have done differently to help Americans? Okay, this is going to tell me a lot, because not only are they going to tell me what are the 2 things I should have put at the end of that and tell me why you chose those 2 things. They're going to have to know what the Great Depression was, what was done in the Great Depression, and what would they do differently. This gives me a good understanding of what they know about the Great Depression and what they would change and how that would have changed the Great Depression. All right, another one for lower elementary. If you could ask the farmer something about his crops or his animals, what would you ask him and why? So maybe you took a visit to a farm and they got to see the cows, and some student wants to know from the farmer, how come let's see, I'm making this up. How come the cow won't eat apples like the horse does? I'm just making this up, okay? I want them to put themselves, they have to know something about those animals. If they know that horses eat carrots. Maybe we'll do carrots. The horses eat carrots. I've never seen a cow eat a carrot. Maybe I'm wrong here. but they have to know something about it and be able to ask it. So this is a real quick, not volumes long, just, tell me, just answer the question. Now, here's something too. You have to model this for them. You have to model responsive writing. You can't just give them the question and hope that they write something down, because you will have students that will write volumes, and you will have students that will write you maybe 3 or 4 words down, and that's it. So responsive writing is a really good tool, but it does have to be modeled. Do it as a whole class for a couple of sessions. Model it, do it as a whole class, and then do that wonderful release of responsibility onto the student. All right, take 6. This one I did have a dice or a die. I think it's a die if it's one. Anyway, a dice. And what I did is I paired my students off in 2s. And the one, let's see, how can I explain this? I'll do it with the mammals versus insects. All right, so I have my 2nd graders. And one 2nd grader in the group knows mammals, because we've been learning about mammals. And the other 2nd grader, we just finished a unit on insects. All right, so the mammal child is going to try writing down as many mammals as he can while the other student is rolling the die. And as soon as that student rolls a 6, then they have to switch. So now the insect student is going to list as many insects as he can while the other student is rolling the die. And as soon as it turns onto a 6, or as soon as he rolls a 6, then they switch. Now, usually I had 2, no more than 3 rounds, depending on the grade level. Then, once the rounds were done, now the students could communicate. The mammals student talked about his different mammals, and the insect student talked about his different insects, and they could talk about what were similarities, what were differences. Talk about which mammals, insects they liked, which ones they didn't like. So that was one way that I used my Take 6. The other Take 6 example I have here is a periodical table. I watched a science teacher one time do this, groups of 2. They had 3 rounds each, and how many what do you call those things? Elements on that periodical table could they list before the person got to the 6? And then when they got done, they compared, they talked about their elements, they talked about the characteristics of their elements. Did any of their elements have the same characteristics, differences? Once again, it's about communicating. Talk about what they have read so that it will stick in their minds. All right. The last one that I have here is color me a poster. This one was always fun to do, and I loved when it came to the water cycle. And my students did this for me one time. They had to use these words. I picked the words for them. They were the vocabulary words: precipitation, condensation, and evaporation. And they had to somehow come up with some kind of drawing. It didn't have to look as nice as this. It could be anything. Bring out crayons and kids go crazy. I don't care if they're kindergarten. I don't care if they're 12th grade. Hand a kid a crayon and they are like, woohoo, this is going to be fun. And so they had to show in picture form what each of these words meant. And so think about the vocabulary words that you are teaching them throughout your unit or your chapter. And is there a way to incorporate this color me a poster? Now, once remember, it's not the poster. The end result is not the poster. The end result is communicating their understanding of what they had learned in the reading. So, I never graded creativity on these. It was about them showing me their understanding, and they actually could talk in small groups a lot. One of my classes did not want to talk in front. They just were not a group that talked in front of a whole group. They liked their small groups. So they would get their poster out and they'd get to talk about their poster. And I tell you what, the things they could talk about, about their poster was a whole lot of information that I would never have known they knew, even through a test. But because they were communicating it, I knew that they got it. All right, so let's keep in mind, now that we are done talking about before, during, and after reading strategies, strategies are not one size fits all. Not all strategies are going to work in every grade level. You have to choose which strategy is going to work best for your grade level and which strategy is going to work best for that particular chapter or that particular unit. So one size does not fit all. Strategies need to be modeled just in a few minutes. Remember, we've done a lot of strategies over the past couple of weeks. You have to model them. Don't assume. Even for your middle school, high school students, you have to model. You will get frustrated if you just say, hey, go and do, put a wonder down on that exit slip and leave. And they will not, be able to tell you what's going on. So, my phone is ringing. Hang on just a minute. Sorry, you know how you're teaching and I see this phone number come up on my phone and I'm wondering if it's really important or not. It wasn't. Sorry. All right. It's kind of like a real world teaching situation here. All right. So strategies need to be modeled. Don't overuse strategies. So for every class, don't start out with an anticipation guide. Don't end every class with an exit slip. Choose them wisely. Vary them because students will get bored of them and they will become ineffective very quickly. Lastly, to keep in mind, excuse me, many content teachers give up on strategies because they feel they've got to get through the content. I understand that. Trust me, I've seen it happen many times. I've had content teachers come to me and go, this would be really good if I had time to do it. All right, start slow. Start slow and then work your way up to more strategies. You don't just jump in the deep end and go, I'm swimming. No. Well, maybe some of you did. Usually start that little shallow end and you work your way up. So I don't, even though I hear content teachers say, I've got to get through my content, I can't do these strategies. And I'm in the back of my mind going, you can do at least one. One is better than none. Do you want your students to read your text? Then prepare them. Do you want your students to understand their text? You've got to help them through that text. You have to get them to navigate through your text. And the only way to navigate through the text is through strategies. So at the end of a semester, and I'm not scolding anybody. I'm not. Because I get it. I'm just saying something to think about. At the end of your semester, I'm hoping your goal is your students have learned your content. Not that you got through the content. There's a difference. Did they learn your content or did they just get through the content? And you know what? It only takes a couple minutes. It does. It only takes a couple of minutes to do a strategy. And once your students get used to these strategies, they start doing them on their own and you don't have to model it for them anymore. So, do they get through your content? Or do you want them to learn your content? All right. Come on. Go. Why isn't it going? See, this is one of those moments. I'm going to stop the video here and let me see if I can get to the next slide. Hang on. There we go. All right, it changed for me after I turned it off. Takeaways. Prepare your students to read. Give them a purpose while they're reading. And the after comprehension includes communication. Prepare, purpose, pass on. That is the way you're going to get them through your reading. All right, I'm pulling back the curtain. Remember when I said you set the stage for reading? I just thought that was cute, pulling back the curtain. We want to get our readers over that finish line. Now I have 3 types of readers here. I've got the reader who's going to be able to get through your reading and get through your text and have basically no problems whatsoever comprehending. Then I've got the middle picture here. They're going to get across that finish line. She's going to need some help. And then we got this poor picture of this lady trying to get over that finish line. She looks like she is just not going to make it. Those are our 30% of our readers who cannot make it through our text, but you know what? We're going to get them over the finish line. And the only way to get those readers over the finish line is to teach them to use these strategies. That's the kind of content teacher you want to be. Get those students over the finish line by doing strategies. All right, this is my last video on before, during, and after strategies. So if you have questions about any of this that I have done with before, during, or after, please be sure that you ask me. But the most important thing I want to get through, I really want to get through this, is your students have to navigate your text. And only you can navigate them through your text by choosing the strategies that will best serve them to comprehend, understand, and communicate. All right, if you have any questions, just give me a shout.